and welcome to Special Events 2021. Who knows what's going to happen next? To be or not to be. We have wonderful people joining. There are people here that I don't know, and I hope that you get a chance to introduce yourselves even over the chat and ask questions. And there are people I know very well and admire and have a lot of expertise. So if somebody has something they want to share, particularly when we start getting to the latter half and we talk about tools or types of events, I would love for you to share your own experiences. This is such a changing field right now that it would be very hard to encapsulate all of it in one webinar, but I will try. I am Elizabeth Finlayson. I am the CEO and lead coach of the Nonprofit Coach. My mission is to create a fairer, more equitable, and inclusive world filled with empathy and beauty. And I do this by supporting my team and I do this by supporting our nonprofit clients with strategic planning, fundraising training, and support, which looks like all different kinds of services, coaching and putting on events and all kinds of things. So if you, in the course of this, feel like you are in need of support, feel free to reach out to the team and we'll see if there's someone that if we can't help you, we will try to find someone who can. If I have someone in my network, I will try to refer you. This is really, I think, the main question that I'm going to try and answer. So this is like, can I bring my gala back? One of the previous webinars we did this year already was talking about planning for the year and setting goals. And one of the things that came up is that it's a really challenging time to plan and that it is challenging. It takes a lot of staff and board time and resources to plan for multiple scenarios. I do still encourage people to do that if a simplified version so that they are prepared. And I really encourage you to have metrics, real metrics that help you know whether you want to transition from a virtual event to a hybrid event to an in-person event to not having an event. What are the actual physical indicators that will let you know that that is a choice that's going to work for you, your constituents, your community, people's health? If you have that, I think it takes a lot of the emotion out of the decision making. I will share an example. I am on the leadership of my church, and we were looking at should we go back and allow people to come into our space. While we were being allowed by the state, and there were other churches who were doing it, we also knew we had constraints that we wanted to work within. For instance, we had a primarily elderly population who goes to our church. And so that was part of our consideration. We had people who were really eager to be in person, and we had people who were really eager to stay out of being in person. And I think being on the leadership, you feel the weight of responsibility for other people's health, or at least I did. And so one of the things we looked at was tying that to a real metric. So we had previously said we wanted to be below the positivity rate of 8%. And we had somebody who said, are we going to just keep opening and closing back and forth? And so we decided it would be under 8% for 3 straight weeks. That way, those of us who felt more cautious were saying, well, that's what we agreed to, and we're going to follow the metric. And those who felt more gung-ho were like, that's what we agreed to, I guess I'll wait 3 more weeks. And so we were able to choose something that was not emotional, but really tied to reality. And I think that made a difference. What I want to cover a lot in here, and I will apologize, I am a bit of a fast talker and a coffee drinker. So if at any point I'm going really quickly or you didn't understand something, please feel free to stop me and I'll reiterate or answer a question. But can I bring my gala back? And I want to look at trends overall. This is what I was looking at to answer this question. So one of the things I looked at were the fashion collections that are coming out in spring. And I thought this particular trend was something that encapsulated a lot what's going on. And it's called, and I think this is so sad, living room disco, right? That there's one thing that seemed prevalent in the fashion collections was an urge towards fantasy and escapism, large volumes of fabric, lots of colors and patterns, stripes, mix and matching of patterns, lots and lots of fabric. And so a lot of what this was showing was a desire, capes, a desire to escape, a desire to be in a fantasy world, a desire to be outside or far away, like gardens, castles, discos, but also real constraint was shown as well. like mixing things with hoodies and sneakers and saying, like they're showing here, it's living room disco. It's not straight out disco, right? It's a lot of sequins, but maybe you can still put them with your sneakers, or you're still going to just wear them in your house, or you're going to pair them with a t-shirt. And I thought this was a really good metaphor for what we're all living through, with this push and pull of wanting to be far away, but also knowing that many of us don't feel comfortable doing that yet, or that the health metrics don't really line up with that yet. And I think our events are going to reflect that. So whether that means we're going to choose to put on an event that we didn't to speak to that yearning, or whether we are going to stay virtual or hybrid because of those constraints, we're going to be walking back and forth through this. I'm also going to show some statistics about some consumer insights right now and some nonprofit insights to help you make the decisions you're going to make this year for your events. So one of the things I thought was interesting, there's a few insights here from the McKinsey & Company December 8th, 2020 consumer survey. So while American optimism on recovery continues to recover, over half of consumers do not expect their routines to return to normal until the latter half of 2021. So I think for those that are looking at events at the first half of this year, I think they're still going to look pretty similar to whatever we did last year. So if you went all virtual or if you canceled, we're going to be, I think, more of a tendency towards those in the first half of the year. By the second half of the year, if the health metrics look different, we might start to see a loosening of restrictions. But I think we're not at a place of the great hurrah yet, where everything's all opened up. And I think our planning needs to reflect that reality. Consumers remain mindful of discretionary spending. We know there are people who feel a lot of constraints around their finances, and there's people who have gained in income during this recession because they're not spending money and they still have their jobs. And so looking at those two classes of people, our donors probably fall across those. And so we're going to need to be paying attention to that in our fundraising. I think this is a real opportunity. 76% of consumers have changed stores or brands or the way that they shop. What I think is important to know about that is that means that we, as many of us already have done, need to change the way we're connecting with our donors, but it also is an opportunity, right? Donors are going to be out there shopping for causes. They are online, they're doing things. We want to be the things that they're finding, right? So what are we putting out there that help donors to find us? They may have left old nonprofits, old ways of doing things. They may be interested in new causes. We saw the emergence of a lot of social justice issues were one of the things that came out. Health. There's a lot of concern and controversy around education, right? So donors are going to be looking to take those passions, their values, their ideas, their fears, and their hopes and put them into nonprofits. So we want to be aware that people are changing behaviors. One of the things that for-profits know is that when a couple has a child, that's when you see a lot of brand switching. All of a sudden, they're going to different stores. They're going in the middle of the night. They're picking up whatever will fit in their cart as fast as they can before the baby wakes up, those kind of things. And so they know that is a time to target couples with new advertising, because that's when you see behavior changes. And so for us to know, we're in a time where, like, that's a good metaphor for the entire country. The entire world is experiencing that. And so it's an opportunity. Consumers are not looking at engaging in normal activity yet, and we know there's a flight to digital like we are right now engaging. I agree on the chat, flight to digital is an interesting word choice. I agree, it's not my word choice. It comes from the survey, but I think, it's something it speaks to about fear, and I think a lot of what I was seeing across all the different pieces I was researching were that yes, there's a yearning to getting back to normal, and there's things that people have picked up during this time, new habits and ways of being that they will take into a post-pandemic world. I think I could use the example of my parents, for instance, did not know how to use Zoom. And maybe did not know how to do some things online and really had to learn in this environment. And so some of those things they will keep because they are useful, and some of those they'll be very glad to drop because, thank goodness, they don't have to worry about clicking on things. And I think we're going to see that across the board. Okay. This, I think, is the most relevant piece of this for us, which is that 59% of Americans are worried to attend a large event. When we look at what they are open to, large events are at the absolute bottom of the list. So you could think about like medium-sized events, and small events would be way before that. And you can see way before that things like going to the hairdresser, I'm trying to think about other things, restaurants, other things where they feel like there can be an environment that can be in control, where maybe people are following protocols, and they're going to be looking for those things as indicators. To me, this says we are not ready to just open up for our big galas. And I know some of you are in states where there is more freedom allowed, and so it's more up to you what you're choosing. And with that, I want to make sure you're choosing something that you're not feeling that whiplash of like in-person, virtual, hybrid. I think that's part of what made last year feel really tiring. So choosing something that is the most lucrative, but also not going to be not have to be walked back so much will be the best opportunity for you. All right, I see some chats here. So yeah, political slants to different states. Yeah, it's true. I have clients all around the country, and they are dealing with different types of concerns. Some people do really careful about what they say, either for or against the pandemic, for or against the the social justice conversation, and they don't always feel in step with their own environment, and that's part of it too. I do have a client that is frustrated that they feel that they have greater health concerns than the area around them, and so they know that other organizations are going to be benefiting from getting to have in-person events and making money that way, and that they are not because they don't feel comfortable with it. And I think we all have to walk the line in our own markets and see what's available to us. So at the top of the list of things that people are eager to get back to are seeing family and seeing friends. And what I hear in that are intimate relationships and a desire for connection. Knowing that, I think that events do play a part in that, right? And we as nonprofits can be part of easing loneliness and creating connection. So I think one thing to think about our events and our fundraisers is not just how are we making money, but also what need are we serving for our donors, for our volunteers, for our community. And do small or medium or hybrid or virtual events have a place in there that allow us to do that? This is, I thought, really interesting because I didn't think of it this way, but virtual volunteering is a trend that began before the pandemic. It makes me think of, I knew of a really high-level volunteer connection organization here in Chicago, and they took, say, people who were maybe raising children, or people who were retired, or people who were professional consultants who had high-level skills, but just either were not applying it currently in the workplace or wanted to do that on top of their very heavy jobs. And so it was a different type of volunteering than you were seeing, and they've connected them to nonprofits. And that's the kind of thing that I think is very much available. And I think we can think about what role do events play in this, and what opportunities are we giving people to fulfill on their values by acting within our nonprofit? Is there data entry? Is there peer-to-peer fundraising? Is there survey collection? Is there advocacy? What are the ways that we are allowing people to participate in things outside of an in-person environment? Okay, this one's got all kinds of stats here. But I just think this is interesting. So I think the virtual events allow us to utilize what's already happening in digital engagement. So it's predicted that 82% of internet traffic will come from live streams, and that internet video traffic will account for 80% of consumer internet traffic. I imagine there's a lot of overlap in that video traffic and live stream statistic, otherwise they don't add up. But I think the idea here is that people are engaging in digital that has a lot of emotional information with it. If you think about something that is just text, lacks emotional context, we're not getting people's faces, we're not getting tone of voice, we're not getting body language, and we are getting that when we have our live streams or our video. And so thinking about that allows us to realize, like, this is something that's already happening, pandemic or no. These are some older statistics, but I think they also show how important it is to be engaging people in these ways. 79% of donors reported that online video ads were the most useful online media marketing that they experienced. 39% of people who watch a video look up the organization within 24 hours. And 57% of people who watch a video for a nonprofit go on to make a donation at some point. The other thing is these facts pair with some other things that we know that are happening, which is that donors are seeking personalized donor experiences. We often have the data to do this coming in. Kedra on here is an expert on Google Analytics. We know this from what we're collecting in our databases. What I often see nonprofits lack is really somebody who is on staff or outside of staff who can analyze that data, give meaningful insights, and allow us to change or alter our behavior that personalizes our communication. That's where I see the real missing is. It's not really a lack of data. It's most often a lack of expertise and a real lack of time, which I don't need to tell anyone on this call about. And over the last 5 years, nonprofits have reported a 77% increase in online revenue. I don't want to overstate this. We do know that paper is still a really important part of the fundraising landscape. It's just that we begin to engage more and more digitally. So just to say that regardless, pandemic or no, some of these are trends that are here to stay, and that these are opportunities. I had to include Captain Sir Tom Moore here, who just died. What a delightful man. When we talk about virtual events, these are just a few that I was able to cull from different research and from the things I know. As you can see, it's a lot of taking things that happen in the in-person world and turning them into virtual. But I would really like to challenge people to be creative and to think about what other things are available. You can never go wrong looking at your own nonprofit and looking at its unique strengths. What are things that you did before the pandemic, during the pandemic, that are unique to your organization? What do people look to you for as experts, either on your board, your staff, the core competencies of your nonprofit? If you look at those things, I think that you'll find there are events that will especially appeal to the people who follow your organization. But there's all different ways that you can do this. Virtual dinners, I've seen people take this to some kind of hybrid. There's a lovely nonprofit that I work with, and they do a food contest every year. And so what they did this year is they had all the chefs cook everything ahead of time. Then they had people come and pick up their sampling, and then then people took them to their homes, and then they did the taste testing, and then they were able to vote for their for which one they thought was the best. And so I think there's really interesting ways that you can allow it to be beyond just this like virtual screen and feeling maybe perhaps a lack of connection. And I think when you can make something physical or something tangible, like when people do the cooking classes, those are some of the things. Wine tastings, you can drop things off to your donors, or you can have them buy things, you can offer coupons, you can partner with corporations or other retail. So there's all kinds of opportunities. The two I want to add some clarity around are virtual gaming and DIY events. Virtual gaming is really interesting. It's not something I know a lot about, but I will talk about one of the tools that does this. And that basically people have these like video game contests that can go for quite a long time. And in it, they have interactive elements where people can bid and, if somebody makes a certain number of points, they're going to give, or allow a certain number of donations so they get a tool in the game, things like that. So I think it can be really interactive and fun. I imagine it's for a particular audience. It's not for your probably octogenarians, but really finding the right audience. Do-it-yourself events, I would actually classify Captain Sir Tom Moore and his, for those of you who don't know, he had decided to do where he would walk with his walker 100 times around his yard, and he had hoped to make £1,000, which is a little over $1,000, for the National Health Service. And sorry, I get emotional about this. He raised $33 million. And but that is an example of a DIY event because it is more, it's not a live event. It's not happening at one time. There were more opportunities for him to do it alone and then for people to interact maybe afterwards or post something. And we'll talk about this a little bit more, but it's a good example. Okay, now that I've cried in my webinar. It's very important to cry in your webinars. Okay, let's talk about tools. This was a slide I was actually maybe a little bit worried about doing because there are so many tools. I in no way want to show that this is comprehensive because it really isn't. But I do want to kind of just touch on different ways to do events just to get you thinking, and then you can continue on and do your research. So let's talk about live streaming. So live streaming is something that includes video and audio at a set time that people can interact with, as I understand the definition specifically. So Twitch, the first tool that's listed on here, is the gaming platform that I know of. I think there is at least one other. But if that idea sounded interesting to you, that's the one I would start Googling and start looking for more things there. Facebook Live, I think many people are familiar with, YouTube Live, Instagram Live. And the other thing to know is that they, several of these do have a Zoom integration. So right now I could, for instance, be Facebook Living this. People
Hello?
would sign in through Zoom. Hello, yeah? No? Okay. People would sign in through Zoom, but it would still have that online live social media presence. The do-it-yourself looks more like the traditional social media and email, but without the live interaction part. So it could be something like, let's say you were going to do a walk or run, but maybe you didn't have a particular software supporting that. It could be something as simple as it's going to last for a month. Everybody has to do a certain amount, and people are constantly posting it on Facebook. That's an example. And then maybe you're emailing out to everybody, oh, this team is in the lead or they're doing this. So it doesn't have that same feeling of we're all in the same place at the same time, but it's interacting over time. I did read about there was a nonprofit that had done that. They, within a very short period of time last year, had to cancel and decided to extend out their event to more like a month, month and a half, and raised about 10 times as much money. So it's not something to say, oh, it has to be live in order for it to be financially successful. Peer-to-peer is something that I think we really do want to take advantage of. I think that people underestimate how important it is to have other people's networks and other people's respect being transferred over to you is really what a lot of it is. Many of my largest donations actually go to one of my friend's causes simply because she is such a fabulous friend and she's just a really good person. And so I support her causes even more than I support my own because what I'm really trying to support is her. And I think that's what we see a lot in that peer-to-peer fundraising. I will disclose again, as I have many times, I have a paid relationship with Network for Good. I'm also familiar with their tools. So I think their peer-to-peer is they handhold you through the process and your peer-to-peer fundraisers. So I think that they are a good way to do that. And Facebook fundraisers were 3% of all online donations last year. So they are here to stay. And so I think definitely looking into those are important. Auction software. I know a lot of organizations right now that are really doubling down on the virtual event, and they are doing a combination of the auction software, the conference software, and different pieces and putting it together. I'm seeing a lot of partnerships with, if you're looking at universities, marketing companies, who else? Auctioneers, different people who are going to help you create a seamless virtual environment. So what people are saving oftentimes in the expenses of food and venue, they are increasing costs around the software here. But from what I've been able to see so far, they are still netting more dollars. So I have here a bunch of different auction softwares. Again, I highly recommend doing your own research. I haven't seen one yet that I was like, yes, this is the one that everyone should do, or that's, the primary leader. I'm seeing a lot of different things out there, and a lot of people asking that question, what's the best auction software? I have not seen one rise to the top yet. So you may need to do some looking around. Someone who is on this call did a fabulous conference. And so while I have a client who's using Remo, GoToMeeting, who's been popular for a long time, I do actually want to ask Roy if he would step on and just actually talk about his virtual conference experience.
Thank you. Sure. We used a platform called Feedloop, P-H-E-E-D-L-O-O-P. As Elizabeth said, there's a lot out there now, especially in the last year, right? It's become its own cottage industry. There's probably, I've probably seen 20 plus different platforms that are out there. I think Remo is a good one. There's Hopin. There's a few others that I've seen used with multiple large organizations. I would say that the distinguishing feature for me really is trying to find something that will give you good interactive capabilities and chat between the people that are at the event. If I were going to point out what I thought was a weakness of our event last year, it was that the concept of the chat and what it was represented to be able to do wasn't exactly the way it worked in practice, because it sort of made you leave the main room to go talk to somebody instead of being able to listen to Elizabeth, and then I could send Heather a message, or I could send, Kedra a message. The idea of what we had was we had a 2-day event with over 70 sessions. So we had a main stage plus 7 program tracks plus workshops. And so there were a lot of moving parts and a lot of people coming in and out. We had over, I think it was 430 some people from about 320 plus organizations in 30 countries. So it was great to bring people together, and I would endorse the virtual conference concept, because I think you can reach people that you may not have access to if it required them coming to a live event in Chicago. So I think that the key thing for me is, how do we create an environment where people can really connect, have a meaningful connection, have some good conversations, but then walk away with substantive connections. I personally hate the events that are set up where, like if this was many organizations, it would be, we would see Elizabeth talking and presenting and we wouldn't know who's here. We wouldn't be able to interact with anybody else. So from my perspective, that's one of the most important elements, but each organization has different things that may be more important to them. And the challenge right now is that all of these softwares are kind of building the train track as the train is coming down, and so they're trying to stay one step ahead of what they need. And so what was good 6 months ago may have fallen behind. What was behind the ball when we looked at it last summer may be better than what we ended up with. So it's an ongoing theme. I'm happy to discuss options with people if anybody wants to go into more detail.
And Roy, can you tell us your organization too, so everybody knows?
Sure. I'm the founder of the Sports Philanthropy Network. So our mission is to build stronger, healthier, and more inclusive communities through sports. It's really about building better people through sports and not about building elite athletes. So we work with sports organizations, athletes and their foundations, and community-based sports nonprofits. And a lot of what we do is provide additional media coverage and exposure through our organizational spotlight and our podcast. And then we provide an array of education and professional development programming, which Elizabeth has been great to support what we do there and participate in that. So webinars, seminars, trainings, workshops, and then Sports Philanthropy World is our signature event, which will be this year, again, virtual, unfortunately, but at the end of June 28th and 29th.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Roy, for sharing your expertise with everybody here. And then I'll just say too, text to give is, I think, emerging is more and more important as we want to find more options for people interacting in the moment with events. Depending on how you're putting together a virtual event, you are going to be looking for different ways for people to donate. And you may be, doing what's called a tech stack, where you've got your text to give from here and your auction from there and whatever, or you may be looking for a platform that has everything. And I think Roy's point was excellent about how the digital marketplace just keeps changing. I think this is very true right now for virtual events. I think a lot of companies are jumping in to fill a need, and a lot of older companies are looking to catch up with the need. But I think that this is true overall with nonprofit technology. There are so many databases. So I used to feel like I wanted to really be up on every single one and have my research and know who my favorites are. But I had talked to one of my collaborators, and we really just decided that it isn't worth it to do it because within 6 months, that information is completely obsolete, and that we're better off kind of starting from scratch and not with those, prejudices of this is a great software or this is a bad software. So I think Roy makes an excellent point with that. Let's move forward. Okay, so let's get to some of the questions we talked about going into this. So we rely on lots of small events to get through. What are my options in 2021? If anyone wants to put a little thumbs up for themselves, if that was something that was the case, let's say pre-pandemic, or is the case during the pandemic, I'll start going over some ideas here. I really see that this year will continue to be a time for experimentation and iteration. I think for some of us, nonprofit leaders are always so close to burnout that I think that could sound exhausting. But I hope that we could all just kind of shake that off, take a breath, and maybe see it as exhilarating or freeing. And I say that to say, if we look pre-pandemic, did everybody love their lives? Did everybody love fundraising the way that it was, loved dealing with events the way that they were, loved dealing with their board the way that it was? This might be an opportunity to really look and say, what wasn't working before the pandemic? And are any of those things that we could say, I never want to do those again? I've spoken many times about being in a situation as a nonprofit leader where you're so pressed for time. You could be in the middle of an activity that is not that effective, and you just don't have the creative energy to think of something different. And that's one thing I think the pandemic did to us. It forced us to do that, and it forced us to say no to a lot of the activity that was there before. With that, I think this is a great time to try things. If you have a lot of small events, let's say you normally had 5 events, and let's say you decided you want to bring all of them back this year. That's 5 opportunities to try something, going into it with goals, writing out what worked and what didn't work, and either taking that into the next event or dropping whatever didn't work or trying something completely different. And then looking at the end of that year and saying, what did we really like out of this? What are we going to do? I took on a client in the middle of last year that was in a really challenging situation. They are in the arts sector, and arts has been a challenging place during the pandemic. And they have come out of it feeling stronger than ever, feeling like they got to try things and knowing that some things really worked and they will keep from now on, and some things they'll be really eager to get back to. And I think if we look at it like that, trying hybrid, if you can do it safely. If you typically do small events, you're not going to be as worried about the capacity. We talked about using the opportunity to cut low performing events. I can't stress this enough that it's really, really important with events that you go into it with goals. I think for a lot of us in nonprofits, we go in with maybe a financial goal where like we just need to make this much money and then everything else be damned. And I think if we look and we say, well, yes, we did raise that money. What about number of attendees? I think many of us go far enough to track both of those things, dollars and attendees. But I really encourage you to have more than 2 goals for your event because events take so much time and energy. I really want you to look and figure out who is the audience for this event. Can we get them a different way? If we are targeting this particular audience for this event, let's say families, what are you hoping to get out of it? Do you want the kids to sign up for your programs afterwards? Do you want the parents to become monthly donors? Do you want a percentage of those donors or those attendees to become just a second-time donor overall? What is it you're hoping to get out of it? If you leave yourself with just those 2 metrics of dollars and attendees, I really don't think we're getting enough out of our events, and we're not knowing whether they're working for us, and we're not bringing them to the next level. Many of us on the consulting side are eager to have organizations consider consolidating to one large event. This may not be the year to actually do that consolidation, but one thing we often see is the amount of time and energy it takes to run a small event is very similar to what it takes to run a large event. And if we added our audience up over our many small events to one large event, it often will make up for what it would take to cancel the 4 other events we would do for that year, and we can charge more. Again, this may not be the year to do it, but just something to consider about it is the cost of all those small events. But also, it's an opportunity. I am seeing stuff jump up in the chat. Heather's always a great chatter, so I'm just click here. So churches talking about limited capacity. They're offering a text to give option. Yeah, I think that is absolutely true. My church has been looking at how do we do online? Oh no, we have to pay fees. What does that look like for us? In here, we've got comments saying, we relied on a few key small events with lots of fundraising and making personal connections for future donations. They tried their first hybrid small event yesterday. Congratulations on your experimentation. Only 40 people in live attendance, and presenters were projected live virtual onto a screen for those in attendance. Others logged in from wherever they are. I appreciate the chats. Thank you so much. That's really great when you can share your experience with other people. Okay. Who are my introverts? We're not even on that yet. For some people, they're really frustrated with being online all day. This was surprising to me because I am always online all the time. But for a lot of people, teachers were saying, oh my gosh, I'm getting headaches from the screen. It's really taking away our in-person connection. There are just people who just cannot stand being online all the time. And so for them, this has been really challenging. My response to this is don't be boring, right? And we don't have to be bored. We talked about all the different ways that we could do an event within those different kinds of tools. So it's really about being creative. It's not about creating another Zoom meeting. Let's talk about these. Lower overall costs. We've mentioned that before. I think that Heather just mentioned this, ability to reach attendees. who are from anywhere, right? But this can also be speakers. It can be volunteers. So I think one thing that I see with people when they transition to virtual is they still have their geographic limitations on. And, they're like, oh, well, I put it on Facebook and anybody can find it. But what would it be like to reach out to somebody in a completely different market, right? What would it be like to say, I'm going to partner with a similar organization in Boston or in California? We have similar missions, or I'm going to use their speaker, and we're going to connect to each other's community, and we're going to be stronger together. Really thinking about that. I actually think that Roy does this very well by connecting all these sports nonprofits. We have increased data on engagement and attendees when we are in a virtual environment. So let's make sure that we're not just throwing something up, getting dollars, and then disappearing. We want to make sure we're using the insights to formulate our next event, or to make sure we're engaging with people properly during the event. All of that, how we're going to email with them, whatever we're going to do, we need to be using the data we're getting from people. I bet Kedra has things she could say about that. Ability to focus attention. This is something that was not true when we were in person, right? If you're standing around with a drink in your hand, talking to your friends, how often were you really glancing up at those sponsor screens? I attended a really great virtual gala with my children for the Chicago Children's Museum here in Chicago. And they used such a great combination of pre-recorded little mini talks from different board members, volunteers, kids, teachers, people dressed up in gala attire, people in their classroom wearing jeans and a t-shirt. They had planned activities that were so engaging. They were teaching things. So I had no problem letting my kids stay up late to watch this. And then they had live music. And so they were switching back and forth between all of these things. It was really engaging. And to think that in there you could have something popping up about your sponsor. You could have an interactive poll. You could have emails going out before, during, and after to your attendees with coupons from sponsors. There's all different ways that you could be utilizing this focused attention. And that is different from a live event. Access to new sponsors. One of my clients has been increasing their sponsorship budget because they know that they have sponsors who are eager to engage in the online forum in a way that they weren't for live events. And so there are opportunities that are available to us here. And we've talked a lot about creativity. Be creative. Okay, I'm seeing stuff show up on the chat. So before we move to this next question, oh, yes, tell on Zoom when folks are messaging and typing away. Yes, it's totally true. I even have somebody that I talk with regularly on the phone, and you get that long delay when you've asked them a question. And they're like, uh-huh. You're like, you did not hear what I said, did you? It is true. People will be doing that. And that's why that engagement in the virtual environment is important. And that's why switching back and forth between different types of things. All right, so this is a question for my introverts. I've had people whisper this to me, like, oh, I hate events. Are they going away permanently? I'm so enjoying being in my house, baking bread and finding my new self, right? I hope that what I was able to share in those trends early on do help answer this question. I don't think that events are going away permanently. I do think that organizations that have been over-reliant on events are pivoting and finding new ways to fundraise. But I think that I really think it's naive to believe that because we've all been sitting at home, once these restrictions are lifted, that people are not going to want to all jump into a room together. Now, we may want to say, I never want to go back to a boring chicken dinner with a person who speaks at 20 minutes, this and that. We might say, I never want to do that kind of event again, and that's fine. But I think that people are going to be very eager to be connecting and being in the same space together. Yeah, so let's talk about pros and cons of events overall, since we are talking about this as a tool. The pros of events and why I actually think they should never go away altogether is that they are an opportunity to get a second gift from the same donor within the same fiscal year. So if you've been doing your other types of fundraising activities and somebody has given to you from their philanthropic budget, but then you also hold an event they will often take from their discretionary budget that's for going out places, going to movies, going to concerts, and they will apply that to your organization. So they are now supporting you in two different ways within the same year. It's a very useful tool for introducing new people to your organization. We know that we're getting people online through social media and all kinds of things, but you know, I noticed that donors have very different donor behaviors, and there's different types of donors. An example I always like to give is that I tend to be very philanthropic. This is my profession. I've dedicated my life to this. I love this work. My husband is not as interested in this. It's not where he finds his attention. But if I've taken him as a guest to an event, to some cause that we know nothing about, and they do one of those auctions, raising his hand, I'm like, why are you giving away our money to this organization we know nothing about? I have a philanthropic plan for how I want to give away my money. But what's really happening there is that moment of being together, being in a space, the excitement, all of that is going to appeal to one type of donor in a way that's different from a different type of donor. So you want to be able to have different ways to connect with your donors. So yes, getting support from those social donors, as I call them. The other thing that we often underestimate when we think about the cost of events in our time and energy is that they excite and engage your current donors. If you think about if you didn't ever have events, then the interaction that your donors are having with you are things showing up in their inbox, things showing up in their mailbox. If they're lucky enough to have a relationship with some of the organization, they might get a phone call, or they might be at a committee where they do work. There isn't a lot where they can celebrate the work and celebrate the accomplishments and feel moved by the work. That emotional component can often be missing. And so once people have attended that, they suddenly feel like, yes, I am going to do this. I am going to be on that committee. I am going to participate in a different way. I am going to keep donating. And so it is an important part of the fundraising mix. But let's talk about cons. It is the most expensive way to raise dollars. It costs 50 cents to raise $1 as the industry standard. Certainly, there are organizations that will get their food and their venue donated, et cetera. And they can get it down to say 30 cents or 25 cents, or maybe, you know, they already have everything. And so maybe they've got it even lower. But I find even when you lower those expenses, you're taking it from somewhere else, like you're taking it out of your staff time. You're scrambling a lot to try to get in kind over and over and over again. And so they can lead to more burnout. And it is the most expensive in staff time if you compare it to other fundraising activities. So that is why us consultants are often hard on events. And so I just say this to say it's a mixed bag. It's not all good and it's not all bad. Because I definitely talk to people who feel one way or the other. All right, I've been doing a lot of talking at all of you. So I just want to stop now and just ask for questions or people to share their experiences before we go to anything else. Or actually, I'll just move over to this how to get in touch with me. All right, we have some coming up on the chat here. Okay, someone said, this is great, but they have to hop off. They said, great presentation. Thank you so much, Keidra, for joining us today.
Elizabeth, this is Heather. I was curious, this slide that was entitled something like virtual events make the best use of engagement or digital engagement or something like that. And I had a whole bunch of percentages from different sources.
Yeah.
I was curious as to how old or new that those numbers are.
That is a great question. Let's see if I can go back to that. So a lot of it was, when I researched for this, because I really wanted to see what other people were saying. I clearly have my opinions about where events are going, but I really wanted to see what was out there. And I was actually surprised to find there wasn't as much as I thought there would be, which was maybe a lesson for me and my company of what I could be providing for people. The consumer insights were December of 2020. The looking into virtual in the future, that was really like end of 2020 through early 2021. Some of it I think as late as February 2021. But some of the stuff about video was actually quite a bit older, but I think really being replaced by live stream. So live stream was taking over video in the percentage of internet traffic. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, so it sounds like most of that is during the pandemic, not before it.
Yes. So we were looking at like current, people's
Okay.
behavior and people's interest. Yeah. Yeah. But the video information is older. So, yeah.
Older as in pre-pandemic?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Other questions or comments or experiences to share? Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us. I am Elizabeth Finlayson, CEO and lead coach of the Nonprofit Coach. This is how you can get in touch with us. If you have tried to get in touch with us for the last couple of weeks, you may have seen an out of office saying that we are experiencing high volumes, which we have been, but that'll be tapering off starting next week. We have the services that we offer right now are things like coaching, event planning, we do strategic planning, grant writing. We have a whole suite of services for organizations. And I also just recommend having a conversation to see what you need. That's really important. A lot of times I like to discourage people from spending money if they don't really need to, and just helping them figure out what they need. So that's part of that there. And I will be taking on new coaching clients starting in April. So if that's something you've been toying with, again, feel free to email. You could just say interested in coaching in the title, and we can have a conversation to figure out if it's a good fit for you. And with that, I just wish you all the best of luck. Oh, is something in the chat? Yeah. And we'll be talking again more. So thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful day and week, and we will, I'll see you again at a future webinar.